would ever use. Bible is based upon Babel, and it means to confuse by intermixing truth and lies. God only has Torah, which is replete with Nabi, prophets, and they include the writings, the most important of which are the Mizmor and Mashal, the Psalms and Proverbs. So God's terminology is that he has a singular thing, Torah, which is replete with prophecy and the lyrics and writings of songs and proverbs. There is no Old Testament, there is no Bible, there is no scripture, and there is no New Testament. So God's presentation is quite straightforward. And so if somebody is talking to you about a Bible, they are speaking of a religious text, and it needs to be rejected outright. Scripture is a Latin word that comes with now a religious underpinning. In Latin, it simply meant writing, but now it's been convoluted to mean inspired writing from God. And there is nothing inspired in the Christian New Testament. It is absolute rubbish. It is illogical. It twists and perverts the actual words of God's, misrepresents them, and it adds all manner of contradictory ideas. So the Christian New Testament, from beginning to end, is in complete contrast with the Word of God. Therefore, if you want to apply the religious connotation of Scripture, it is not. Now, as it relates to the New Testament, which is what I'm disproving, it does not begin with Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the book of Acts. The Christian New Testament begins with Paul's letters, and the first of those letters was the book of Galatians. And Paul's 14 letters all were written prior to the first gospel. Gospel is actually Paul's term. That term has no bearing in anything that Yahowah, who is God, actually said. It is entirely Paul's term because he wanted to create a different and new message. And that evangelion, his new and different message, which he perceived as being better, is in complete contrast with God's testimony. And so it is the word evangelion that has been convoluted to gospel, but it was conceived by Paul. The first two, Mark and Luke, were written by Paul's cronies. Paul admits that he solicited Mark for this purpose, and Luke was his chief propagandist and spiritual healer. And so Mark is a hearsay account. It is grossly incomplete, and it was written 10 years after Paul's death, based upon Paul's interpretation of the Jesus character that he invented, a man who never existed. There was no Jesus nor a Mr. Christ in first century Yahowah, in the Roman province of what is called now Judah, but correctly Yahowah. No such individual existed. There is no contemporaneous eyewitness account saying otherwise. Mark is very incomplete. Luke tried to add to it by adding passages from Odysseus and mythological statements from the Sibylline oracles to flesh it out. It begins now as you would be reading the Iliad or the Odyssey. He made a bad situation with Luke far worse. Both books were written in Rome around 75 CE, 2 generations or 4 decades after the events played out. And again, they were written to accommodate Paul's letters as opposed to the other way around. One of the interesting things that affirms this, not only in the age of the text and the first time that they're referenced, that we know the age that these things were generated and where, Paul never once cites the gospel Jesus. So the gospel Jesus that was based upon Paul's letters is never once cited by Paul. And that means he didn't speak for him. And he wouldn't even exist until 10 years after Paul's death. So you need to understand the order of things before you can even move forward in your understanding of what text you're looking for. The other thing that is interesting is people will say that the faithful will say that it's the inerrant word of God. And I'm here to tell you that having dealt with the earliest 69 manuscripts of the books that became the Christian New Testament, the ones that were scribed with a date prior to the rise of Constantine and Eusebius, which would have been in 320 to 25 CE, 300 years after the fact. That at that point, the changes to the text became so gross. There were so many additions and synchronizations that the manuscripts don't have any value from that point on. The difference between the 69 pre-Constantine manuscripts and the Textus Receptus or the Nestle Aland, there are over 300,000 variances with only 184,000 words in the text. So you get some idea that there are more variances than there are words. So to say this is an errant means that you're stupid, that you have absolutely no concept of the history of the text itself. The text is more variant than it is consistent. And by the time you reach Constantine and Eusebius, they had a free hand. The two most important lines, for example, in the Christian New Testament, "You are the Christ, and upon this rock I will build my church," because otherwise there's no justification for Christian or Christ or anything else. It was written by Eusebius and right around 330 CE, 3 centuries after the fact. You cannot find it in any copy of Mark or of Matthew prior to that time. It's the first appearance is in the Codexes Venaticus and Sinaiticus, both written by Eusebius, both at Constantine's decree, both of which are highly troubled, enormously flawed, constantly updated and corrected and added to, correct is not a correct term, augmented and changed text to the point that all they do is disprove the credibility of the Christian New Testament as opposed to validate it. And both of those lines were added by Eusebius at that time. They were both added in front of the cave of Pan, which would be the entrance to hell and in Greek philosophy and religion. They were both added 3 years into the alleged life of the disciples with the alleged Iesou Christou, the man who never lived. And then to say, who do you say I am? 3 years into their relationship is to say they didn't have any substantive discussion of any kind prior to that time. So the first 3.5 years were a complete utter waste. Who knows why they were walking around the Judean wilderness and having conversations, because they never talked about anything substantial.
You just gotta believe.
So it is a ludicrous conversation to have 3 years in. And the comments that are made following it are even more incredulous, where both times in different words, the Jesus character turns to the Peter character and says, "Don't you dare tell anyone this, that catastrophic things will happen. So don't you tell anyone I'm the Christ." Well, then how did he become Mr. Christ? Then how did there become a Christian religion? So he told them, "Don't do this," and that's exactly what was done. So the very line that is the most essential to Christianity, by the way, has no bearing. There is no prophecy of a Mr. Christ. There is absolutely not even a prophecy of a coming Messiah. Even that is erroneous, and you wouldn't say if you were in a Hebrew speaking country speaking Hebrew, you wouldn't say you are the Christ, because that's a Greek name having no bearing to any prophecy. So you wouldn't even say that. But if you were, there had to be a basis for you are the Messiah. What was the basis? There is no basis for it. The only place that talks about an arriving Messiah is in Daniel 9. And in that case, it's not actually even used as a title. There's no definite article before it. And the statement is made by the very person that Yahowah affirms 3 times is the Messiah. That Yahowah says in fact, it's actually more than 3 times when you put all of the references to Yahowah anointing Dode together. It's many more times than that. But the only person that Yahowah acknowledges that he has chosen to be the Messiah, that he himself has anointed as the Messiah, is Dode David. And Dode is Gabor El, the very person speaking to Daniel at the time, and he says that this is what he is going to do. And he says at the time that when he comes to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, which he gave the exact date that he would fulfill it 500, almost 600 years in advance, because that meeting took place in 555 BCE. Dode gives the exact date that he's going to fulfill Chog Matzah, which is Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim combined. And Christianity doesn't reference Passover, and it has its pretend God napping during Matzah, and it is during Matzah that he was cut off, but not for himself. That's the time that Dode's nephesh soul carried our guilt into Sheol. And so the whole prophecy completely annuls Christianity. Moreover, in that prophecy, it says that when he does that, it will be the conclusion and the end of prophecy. There'll be no more prophecies. You can't have a prophetic text from God following that event and claim that event is the basis of your Mr. Christ, since it says nixnay on the prophecy from that point on. It's just utterly stupid. It is so incredulous that you could have a religion that grew out of such nonsense. But anyway, when dealing with these, and the text that I'm going to read to you, I use Papyrus 45 when dealing with Paul. It's early to mid 2nd century. It's the earliest text there is. There is nothing that is older or more credible. And I provide a literal translation out of Papyrus 45. You cannot argue with what I have rendered here without saying that there is no basis whatsoever for anything that Paul said. And if there's no basis for anything Paul said, there's no basis for the Gospels. And if there's no basis for the Gospels, there's no basis for Christianity. So you have to deal with what he wrote, and what he wrote was utter nonsense. And again, he begins here by saying Paulos. His name wasn't Paulos. He changed it to Paulos. Why would a man change his name? He was running for something. His name was Shaul. He admits that his name is Shaul 3 different times in Luke's propaganda piece promoting him. All 3 times where he admits that he is Shaul, it's in his alleged conversion experience. All 3 of which, by the way, are contradictory. He has a different story all 3 times. And the last of which is the most laughable, because in the last of which, to give credibility to his conversion experience, where he is made blind and lame. That's some God. Okay, you're my guy. I'm going to make you, I know you're off murdering my guys, so I'm going to make you blind and lame. Okay, it's very much like what Muhammad experienced with a mean spirit in a cave. And Muhammad had the wherewithal to say, oh, I was demon-possessed. So Muhammad knew he was demon-possessed. Paul would later in his life admit he was demon-possessed, but not during his conversion experience, which was obviously demonic. But the 3rd time, he cites Dionysus. The only difference between Paul's Iesou Christou and the actual sacrifice and titles ascribed to Dode. David is the actual Messiah, the actual Son of God, the actual person who not only was crucified in 33 CE by the Romans, but wrote about his own crucifixion, providing an eyewitness account in Mizmor 22, 1,000 years before he endured it. The only difference, though, between the actual Dode, David, and the major claims made pursuant to this Jesus character is that Paul had to hugely borrow from Dionysus, because Dode is the son of God, not God. and Paul wanted a god. So he turned to Dionysus. So the dying and resurrecting God, that's Dionysus. Easter week, that's Dionysus. Almost all the Christian symbols pursuant to this, they're Dionysus. So it's Dode's title, Son of God and Messiah and Savior, as well as King. It's Dode's act. He was crucified and then carried our guilt into Sheol on Matzah in 33 CE. So it's Dode's actual life experience in his second of three lives. And it's then burnished with a heavy dose of Dionysus to create this God man. And so in the third experience, he quotes Dionysus and the line from Euripides' play, it's difficult to kick against the goad. In the play, Dionysus is telling the main character that to oppose religion is an exceedingly difficult thing to do. And religion is the goad. It's that sharp stick in the side of a dumb animal that herds them around. And that's the nature of religion. And therefore, since religion is the controlling mechanism for people, the false god Dionysus is heard saying, it's difficult for a man to oppose religion. And I can say that that part is right. Of course, it was written by a man, not Dionysus, because Dionysus didn't exist either. But Euripides knew that the purpose of religion was to impose control mechanisms, and they are very difficult for people to work outside of, because if you spoke against Dionysus or Zeus in ancient Greece, they would kill you. If you speak against Jesus or Mary, Mother of God, in a Christian country, they'd kill you. The fact that they were false didn't mean anything because they were control mechanisms. So Paul changed his name so that it sounded, because it was Paulos, sounded more like Apollo. Because he needed godly veneer as well, and he had to run from his real name, which was Shaul, because 666 years before Shaul wrote his first letter, Paul called him out. God called him out by name. The book of Habakkuk, he says that Shaul is the plague of death, and he goes on to talk about the religious lore that he would create, the lies that he would promulgate, who he would lie to, the consequence of his lie. It's all laid out in Habakkuk, something that we have reviewed and will review again as part of these programs. So Paul changed his name. Shaul changed his name from Shaul to Paul. The other reason that he changed his name, it wasn't just that God specifically called Shaul out, Paul out by name, calling him the plague of death 666 years before he wrote the book of Galatians. But also the Shaul, who was the enemy of Dode, the actual Messiah and Son of God, in the experience and history of the Israelites, is a harbinger of the Shaul that creates the Christian religion. They were both Torah adverse. They were both demon possessed. They both died miserable deaths, and they both tried to kill and bury Dode. And so one is a harbinger of the other. So that's why he changed his name. So it's Paulos here, not Shaul. He says he's an apostle. The moment he wrote that word, he says, that means I'm a fake. You can only view that favorably if your perspective is from the religion, imposing the religion back onto the text. You cannot view that favorably if you are viewing God's story as he revealed it. Because that would say, what Paul is saying is that I have this special title that's a divine title, and that you will know who I am because God has spoken of this divine title, and I'm prophetically fulfilling this divine title. Except, guess what? There is no divine title of apostolos. Oops, yes. So Paulos, an apostle, which means I'm lying to you. Not from men, and he is absolutely a man, so he's further lying to you. Not even of the by the means of man, I'm lying to you a third time. So He has lied about his name. He has lied about his title. He has lied that he is not a man, and he has lied that this is not by means of man. The entire basis of Paul's arguments to create his mythical man god and his religion are all based on the rabbinical style of taking something God has said, taking it out of context, misrepresenting it to come to an ulterior conclusion, and building a religious mantra off of misquoting and misrepresenting God's text. It is an absolute learned skill, if you will. And it came from his rabbinical training. And he admits that he was trained by the rabbis. And so he's now lied 4 times. Paulos is a lie, apostles a lie, not a man is a lie, and not by means of man is a lie. But by the contrary, on behalf of Iesou Christou, that is a double lie. There was no one named Iesou, Iesus, or Iesun in the province of Yahowah. No one. The name is a Greek name. It cannot be on somebody who is prophesied or predicted by the Torah and prophets, because there is no mention of an Iesou, Iesus, or Iesun, which was later a lot later, 1,600 years later. The name Jesus was first written in the 3rd edition of the King James Bible. So there was no Jesus, but there wasn't even an Iesou. Sorry. So he's speaking of an imaginary friend. It's like the movie with Harvey. It's my pet rabbit. I've got a frog in my pocket. He might as well be saying that, I really like the god Dionysus, but I don't like his name. So I'm going to come up with another name for the god Dionysus, and I'm going to call him Iesou. He can be my pet. Nobody by that name existed. He is complete conjecture by Paul. Not Hebrew, therefore cannot be prophetic. There's no reference to anybody by any derivation of that name. And he can't be Hebrew, so therefore he is not part of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms and the extenuation of that. Now, there is a reference to an observant foreigner that permeates the Torah, all the way through the Torah, all the way through the prophets. But if you're going to introduce him, he ain't the Christou. He's the Bakowr. And so you could speak of the coming Towrah for example, from Yahowah, but he has the 7 spirits of Yahowah, and he is presenting the entire picture that Yahowah has painted about and speaking of Yahweh's return. So you can't use that one very well, but there's a lot of prophecy on the Towrah. There's a lot of prophecy on the Bakowr. There's a lot of prophecy pursuant to the Zoroas. In fact, even in the most profoundly prophetic portrait of what Dode would do by being the Passover lamb and carrying our guilt away, it begins by saying, if you want to understand this, you first need to know the one who came to know the identity of the Zoroah. But he's not calling him a Zoroah. He wants to call him a Christou. Now, Christou is not a viable title. It's derived from the Greek verb Christos, and it means to apply drugs. If you want to say that this individual is spoken of prophetically, that he comes out of the text of the Torah and prophets, then he has to have a title that is derived from the Torah and prophets. Messiah is a title, but it's not Christou. Titles need to be transliterated from the original language. For example, that the leaders in Egypt were called pharaohs, so we call them pharaohs. We know that in more recent days that the terrorist leader of Al Qaeda was Osama bin Laden. He's Osama bin Laden in Arabic. He's Osama bin Laden in English. When we speak of kings, we use that title. You transliterate the title. Genghis Khan, Shah of Iran, all Julius Caesar or Caesar Augustus would be more common to this. There is no Christou. as a title. And if it's a title, it has to go before the name. But there is no such person. And the only reference to an arriving Messiah is in Daniel 9, where the prophecy is actually presented by Gabriel, who is the Messiah. And he's speaking of his own arrival, just as he spoke of his own crucifixion. So you cannot have a Christou. The very moment that you get to a Christ, you're saying, I want to believe in fairy tales and counterfeits. Oh, that frightening experience right there was my beloved Asher, the white lab. She was leaning up against a picture that is hiding part of the soundproofing that we put in this room. It's just the Rainbow Studio was built as a spa. And so we do have soundproofing all around it because the echoes don't work really well in this kind of an environment. And so I have soundproofing behind it. And she bumped up of a picture that made the soundproofing look a little more attractive. And it fell down and go boob and scared her to death. So we'll press on. Thank you for the fixing that. The moment you go to a Christ or Christian, you've lost it. You've lost it. You have no connection to the Torah and prophets and Psalms, so you have no God. You have no prophecy. You have no God. You have nothing. It is completely and utterly contrived. You will not find a reference to a Christou, a Christone, or a Christus, the three endings that permeate the original text, anywhere. Anywhere. Not. There is none. You could search the Torah, prophets, and Psalms for 1,000 years. You will find no reference to a Christou. You will find no reference to an Iesou. I'll give you $1 million, you find one. You got to look in the original Hebrew. I want you to check the oldest manuscripts, which you'll find in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'll give you $1 billion if you can find a mention of an Iesou or a Christou. Because you can't. It's not there. It's all imagined. It's all contrived. It's counterfeit. And the Theos, the God. If you are speaking for God, you know his name.
Yahowah?
Yahweh would be his name. That's the reason why there are 7,000 mentions of Yahweh's name in the books that he inspired. When Yahweh speaks to us through a prophet, he speaks under his name. You'll find Yahweh's name written all the way through the Torah, the prophets, and Psalms. Why? Because that's God's one and only name. He doesn't have multiple names. He never says, oh, by the way, my name is Jesus. No, never. There's no reference to a Jesus, ever. He doesn't say, my name's Allah. Never. When he introduces his name to us via Moshe, the scribe who both wrote down the experiences during the Exodus, wrote down dictation as what happened in Bereshith prior to his time, and then wrote down a copy of what he said when he was delivering the speeches of Verbatim. When Moshe first met with Yahweh, he had been away from Mitzrayim. He was raised in Pharaoh's household in Mitzrayim. He left because he was disgusted by the way that the Mitzri, the Egyptians, were treating the Hebrew slaves. And he tried to defend them, but the Hebrew slaves didn't like that either. And so he just left and he went to Arabia. He was raising sheep around Mount Choreb. And when God appeared to him, not in a burning bush, but on the blazing summit, the rocky crag at the top of Mount Choreb, and invited Moshe by name to come to visit with him, he told Moshe, when Moshe said, who am I going to tell them the children of Israel is sending me? And Yahweh began by saying, I am who I am. That says, Ihaya, Asher, Ihaya. Asher is a relational pronoun and verb and name, and it means to show the ways to the benefits of the relationship. Haya means I was, I am, I will be. It is the Hebrew word for existence. And so, and Haya would be prefaced with with ani, which is the Hebrew word for I am. So I am, I exist, I was, I am, and I will be for the benefit of the relationship. And then he said, tell the children of Israel that Yahowah has sent you. Yahowah is the way I want to be known and remembered for all time and all places. Yahowah is God's one and only name. It's obvious. It's irrefutable. I was instrumental, being the first person to not only correctly demonstrate the proper pronunciation of Yod He Wah He in Yahweh's name, and proving it is the next step in the book, the first book of An Introduction to God series, free at yadayah.com. I systematically prove, irrefutably, that the proper pronunciation of Yod He Wah He is as Yahowah. And so Yahweh is God's one and only name. I know it. And since Paul did not know it and did not use it, he did not know God. He was not speaking for Yahowah. So the moment that he used theos there, as opposed to using Yahweh's name, he wasn't speaking for Yahowah. Then he wants to present his God as the Father. And while God is a father figure to certain individuals, for example, he presents himself as the father of David, who he says is his beloved son. He never says, by the way, he is the father of Jesus. He never says he's the father of Iesou. He never says I'm the father of the Christos, ever. But he is the stated father of the actual Messiah and Son of God. And he is the father of the covenant. Yahowah uses the term Ab, father, enough in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms to demonstrate conclusively that it is the role that he wants to play with his children. But he does not overuse it. It is way overused in this introduction because it is without context in this introduction, and it has to have the proper context, which is either Yahowah stating, I am the father of Dod, and he is my son. Dod would be David. Or I am the father of the children of Israel as they become covenant. The covenant is a family. So this is not an accurate use, because you cannot say that he is the father of the one roused and awakened, because there was no one that was aroused and awakened. Sorry, but the idea of a resurrection is nonsense. It defeats the purpose of the Passover lamb. It is counterproductive. Not only is the body of the Passover lamb incinerated that evening, so there can be no bodily resurrection, rendering the whole lie of Christianity utter nonsense. The fact of the matter is, bodily resurrection would be counterproductive. The reason that we participate in Pesach, Matzah, and Bakowr, by the way, which is a universal whole. Pesach by itself is counterproductive. It would make you eternal, but separated from God. Matzah is where your guilt is removed if you are following God's instructions pursuant to the covenant and attending his Moed Mikre as he has designed them. That is the time that Dod's nephesh soul, after fulfilling Pesach with his Bashar body, carried our guilt into the black hole that is known as Sheol, rendering us innocent from God's perspective. And as a result of those things, Dod, as the Bakowr, the firstborn of Yahowah, enabled the rest of us to become Bakowrim, the firstborn children on Bakowrim. And this is the fulfillment of the entirety of that process. And there is no part of the process that someone was awakened or roused from the dead. Dod's body was destroyed, meaningless to him. They're glad to be rid of it. That's the whole idea. We attend these Moed Mikre and approach this fire that God speaks of for the express purpose of having our physical bodies transition and transformed from these anchors that hold us back, that deprive us of access to the universe, to time, the fluid expression of time, and eternal time, the ability to go not only explore the entire universe, but to enter Shamaim. We can't get off this rock that we live on and actually survive in any other place for any amount of time while we have physical bodies. And we certainly can't travel to another solar system while we have physical bodies. We have to dispose of them to be released of them. They are a burden. And what you want is the exact opposite of a bodily resurrection. What you want is that when your body is done, you want your soul to be encompassed by radiant energy and light. And when that occurs, then you are enabled, should you have also capitalized on matzah, where your guilt is removed, then you're in a position to enter Yahweh's presence. While you have a body, you cannot do that. So this idea of being roused and awakened, resurrected, is counterproductive. So I don't know if that's the 10th or the 15th lie, but there we are.
That's all part of Dionysus and the play.
Yeah.
That's an integral part is resurrection of
the annual resurrection of Dionysus during what is essentially Easter week.
Yeah.
During the Dionysian festival, which became Easter week. Out of a lifeless corpse, he says. No. This is one of the things that should be exceedingly easy for people to understand. But for some reason is hard for them to. And I can only assume that it's hard for them to understand because of Christianity, and also because of Islam, where the body is a big deal. The fact of the matter is that the body is meaningless with Yahowah. Your bashar is discardable. You want to get rid of it. You can't make any progress with God after your mortal existence unless your soul is completely enveloped in light energy. So when the body is gone, your soul can go to one of three places. The vast majority of humans have their soul simply eliminated. It's dispersed to nothingness. There's no reward. There's no punishment. There's no trip to hell. There's no trip to heaven. You didn't know God. God didn't know you. You had your life. You were fortunate to have been given that opportunity. You squandered it, or you made something of it, but you did not get to know the means to develop a relationship with Yahowah. And at the end of your mortal existence, your soul is simply extinguished. No reward, no punishment. Now, I am the first person to figure that out, but it is obvious when you read God's text. It is everywhere that most souls simply die and they cease to exist.
It's fair.
It's fair.
The whole love me or die thing just turned me off.
Yeah, that's the very thing. I just had a very good conversation with Joe, my programming friend from my prior businesses, who is now publishing our books and publishing our website. And we had talked about the things that we had gone through and learned over time. And he says, the one that drew him to me was when I was the first 24 years ago to ascertain that there are three destinations for human souls, and the vast majority of souls simply cease to exist, because I took God's words literally. I said, this is what he's saying. And if he's saying that a soul is dead, then that's it. There is no eternal torment in hell, and there's no eternal reward in heaven. Totally fair. You didn't know me. I didn't know you. No love lost here. We'll just part, and no penalty, no reward. Your soul simply ceases to exist. And that's the nature of most souls. And that would make perfect sense, because all animals have souls. And while there's been 100 billion people since the first Homo sapiens, there are trillions and trillions and trillions of animals. I mean, a bug has a soul, a slug has a soul, a snake has a soul. Whales have souls. All animals have souls. Where do you think all those souls are going? So no, most souls just simply cease to exist. When God created DNA in this three-dimensional alphabet, he created a mechanism which science doesn't even understand to this day, but we have limited perceptions, where that three-dimensional mechanism was capable of generating a soul for an animal. The soul for an animal is that animal's unique ability to perceive their environment, to observe it, and then to respond to it. And we humans have one. The only difference between humans and other animals is God gave us humans a nasalma in addition to a nefesh, so that we can reason our way to God, so that we can think, so that we can be judgmental, so that the things that I'm telling you, each of which prove that Christianity is an utter lie and that Paul should not be trusted and that there was no Jesus, that tool that I am using that is far more powerful than any AI engine is a nasalma. Now, I will tell you that most humans don't use theirs. I have lost the ability to exercise good judgment. They are not discerning. They're not discriminating. And AI can't replicate that for you. So the very fact is that there is no resurrecting a lifeless corpse. Once your body is lifeless, you want to leave it alone. In fact, the Towrah says, don't touch it. It's a bad decaying thing. It is going to decay, and it should. It's the normal cycle of life. It should decay. It's your soul that matters. So it's the opposite of what Paul is saying. And it was when Yahowah had Dod, the Son of God and Messiah, fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakowr, when his physical body, his Bashar, fulfilled Pesach, symbolizing the lamb, at the end of that mutilated body was not only discarded, was incinerated in accordance with the Towrah. And then it was his nefesh soul continued to live, and that nefesh soul took our guilt into Sheol, and then the nefesh soul was protected and enveloped in the ruach of Yahowah, brought Dod's nefesh back to Shamayim to be with Yahowah. No lifeless corpse, no resurrection. That's counterproductive. So he lied in Paulos, he lied apostle, he lied of not men, he lied by not a means of men, he lied by Iesou, he lied by Christou. He lied by God as opposed to Yahowah. He misapplied Father. There was no resurrection or awakening. There was no lifeless corpse that has anything to do with Yahowah. Yahowah says, don't touch those lifeless corpse. He's made 10 mistakes so far, and we're in the first verse of his first letter. And this became the most popular religion in the history of mankind. Are you out of your mind? And the sentence is a run-on sentence. It continues into the second verse, and it continues with lies. And all of the brothers. So he says, I'm speaking for Iesou Christou, who never existed, and the God, whose name he does not know, of the dead corpse. And then he says, and all of the brothers, there are no brothers. None. The Jews that heard Paul speak in Galatia mocked him. They knew he was out of his mind. Anybody that knows the Towrah will laugh in Paul's face. He made a complete, utter fool of himself. Anyone who was schooled in Galatia and rhetoric, which many were, because the Greeks really enjoyed rhetoric. If you were schooled in rhetoric, you knew that Paul created all manner of fallacies. He is the king of the rational fallacy. So they mocked him. And just the run-of-the-mill Romans that were there said, are you out of your mind? You've just made an utter fool of yourself. Just go away. And so when he's writing this, he's going to say, why is it you rejected me? You liked me when I was there, and now you're mocking me. Oh. So he didn't have any brothers. The Jews, who would have been kin, rejected him. By the way, he didn't have any natural brothers. But the Jews that were kin all mocked him senseless. And he wasn't kin to the Romans or the Greeks, and neither of them bought into his story. With me, and there are none with him at this time. He will pick up a posse as he moves on, and the posse that he picks up that's skeptical too. Barnabas was his lead accomplice, and when Barnabas was exposed to others that knew the truth about the Torah, Barnabas says, "Hey, I'm out of here. You're nuts." And so he demeans Barnabas, and he can't. The alleged disciple Peter, he tears to ribbons. He condemns him. He says that anything that John, as an alleged disciple, had to say is untrue, and that it has to be redone because John's gospel is an untrue gospel, and only Paul's gospel is the one that matters. So he can't have them as his cronies. So who's a crony? Timothy, his little boy toy? No, he doesn't have any brothers. So that's the 11th lie. With me to they called out. And this will say church and your English Bible, but there's no basis of church. This would be the 12th lie. Ecclesia means called out. There is nothing church related. Church is just a total replacement for the word. You have two choices in translating. You either look at a word, and this is just a word, and you translate that word into the words of the other language. So if it's ecclesia in Greek, it would be called out in English. Ek means out, ecclesia means to call. Your other option is to say, well, it's a title or a name, and titles, you would transliterate the sound of the word. So he would say, to the ecclesia. But he didn't. And that's not what it says in your English Bible. In English Bible, it says church, doesn't it? And church is just a word with a pagan past. The only thing that was close to church was church. Church. Church is the daughter of Helios in the Germanic pagan religions. Helios was the sun god, and Church was his cute little daughter.
Well, that sounds familiar. Let's join this club.
Yeah. And from church, we get in English the English words circus, circuit, and circle, like the little halos above everybody's little head, little sun disk. So we now have our 12th lie. Of the Galatius, well, there wasn't a ecclesia in the Galatios. In fact, he's going to say that everybody abandoned him. So he can't say that there is an institution by any name in the Galatias that is associated with him as brothers, because everybody that heard him, according to him himself, mocked him and abandoned him. So that's now the 13th lie. But we're through the second verse. So we didn't have nearly as many lies in the second verse as we had in the third. There were only 3 in the second verse, and 10 in the first. So he's making progress. Okay, how does he do in the third verse? Yeah, we got lie number 14. Grace. He wrote charis. Charis, grace, doesn't matter. Same goddess. Yahowah doesn't have a grace, doesn't have a charis. The graces and the charities, as we would now say them in English, it's gratia and charis in Latin and in Greek, were really cute little girls. So you'll see them all over Pompeii and Herculaneum on the walls of Roman homes of the really rich Romans, because they loved to party hardy. And the charis and the gratia, they were the party girls. Same girls, just different name between Latin and Greek. They were always depicted naked. They were always having a swell time. They were partiers. They were into licentious kinds of behaviors. They liked the wild parties. And so he is now using the name of pagan goddesses as the definition of his new religion. When Yahowah wrote, how do you tell the difference between a true prophet and a false prophet? He begins with things like, if they are a true prophet, then I will have denoted them. I will have told you about them. I will, like that Nakri and Nakar that I mentioned in the Choder. God has on record multiple times and saying, I'm going to send the Choder. I'm going to equip the Choder with the seven spirits of Yahowah. There will be an observant foreigner in the end days that will be speaking for me. He is my voice, and you need to listen to him. God will designate those people speaking for him, and Paul just made up a term. But he goes on to speak. He says, one of the key way to tell is they'll speak in my name if they're speaking for me. Paul didn't. And if they speak in the name of other gods, different gods, like Baratia, Charis, they are lying and they're deadly. Run from them. So with the mention of grace, anyone who has read Verbatim, Deuteronomy, knows that Paul was now a false prophet. Is that number 14? I think so. Number 14, to you. And then peace is Irene. The single most prominent of all Hebrew words, used by Yahowah a great many times. But if you are a Jew, which he was, and you're speaking of the message of God in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, then this is a word you're going to transliterate, because it is a word that has rich meaning, and it's shalom. It's not Irene. Shalom means peace in the sense of a reconciled relationship. When a relationship has been resolved of the former division, then you are saved from the negative consequences from it. So it conveys that. It speaks of satisfaction and harmony and of tranquility and of well-being. And so it is a very powerful term that focuses our idea on the restoration and reconciliation of a relationship. And if you're going to be speaking for Yahowah, rather than transliterating the name of the charities as cherish, you're going to say shalom. Shalom is a very important godly term, but he didn't. So that's number, 14. From Theos, God. Nope. You're going to make a declaration. I mean, you look at the cover of my books, they don't say yada God. They say yada Yahowah. Introduce the fact that my mission is to speak on behalf of Yahowah. If you don't make that declaration and distinction, then you are not. That means the Christian New Testament does not speak for God. That means the Talmud does not speak for God. That means the Quran does not speak for God. The Torah and prophets, they speak for Yahowah. His name is found throughout. He says, then Father of us, that would be the 16th mistake. He is only the Father of those who are part of the covenant family, and Paul created his own personal covenant. And Kyrios, Lord, Iesou Christou. God does not like his identity associated with the Lord. There are times when people write and they use the honorarium, and they'll use Adonai and my Lord, and speaking of him and to him. It is more likely that it's just a bad transliteration of Adon, and the Adon would mean my. Adon is presented in the Torah as the upright pillar of the tabernacle. So it says that, you are the upright support pillar of my life. You are the one who is securing and enlarging this family environment that it protects me in this tabernacle where you can witness to me. And so Adon, which is written in the Hebrew exactly the same as Adon, is a very telling term that is very appropriate to apply to Yahowah, but not Lord, as in Adon. Yahowah, you cannot present God as both Father and Lord. They are incompatible concepts. Fathers do not lord over their children. So they're completely incompatible. And if you don't know what the words mean, then you ought to be careful. But this is now Paul's 15th mistake. And now he is repeating the mistake of Iesou Christou. No Iesou, no Christou, no possibility, no way, no how, not even remotely accurate. That's Galatians 1:3. The one having given himself on account of the sins of us. No. God doesn't give two hoots about the sins of anybody. There are 4 or 5 words that are errantly rendered sin in the Hebrew language, but none of them speak of sins. And our personal foibles are of no interest of any kind to God. The terms that he uses, for example, chata, awon, pesha, ra, are the primary terms that he uses for missing the way, being wrong, and of perverting and twisting his testimony and being in rebellion to him. Pasha, for example, would be in rebellion to him. Awon would be going the wrong way. Chata is incurring guilt. Ra is being a malignant and malevolent in one's approach to fellow countrymen and one's language. These words all speak of collective rebellion, betrayal, and of being wrong in a societal sense. And so what God is saying is wrong, is awon, is chata, is pesha, is ra, is, and it's also evil, which is very close to evil, right? All of these things are religious. They're all speaking of societal, systemic systems that mislead people en masse away from the truth. And the only things that fit that role are religions. So all 5 of those terms that I've just shared with you, they are exposing the negative consequence of religion. Paul is establishing a religion. There is almost nothing that God says about individual malfeasance. So that if you cheat somebody out of their lunch money, bad on you, but there isn't a procedure in place to specifically resolve cheating somebody out of their lunch money. God has lots to say about treating people fairly and of not getting involved in incest or pedophilia or bestiality. He has a lot to say about telling the truth and why it's important to bear a truthful witness. But God did not create a mechanism of resolving individual mistakes. And you say, so the whole concept of sin from, I looked at my friend Susie from across the street, and I said, boy, she's really pretty. Therefore, I've committed a sin in my heart. That kind of stuff, God's completely uninterested in. As a matter of fact, what God's looking for is, rather than you being Pollyanna and perfect, he is looking for you to make mistakes. He wants you to make mistakes. Because if you don't make mistakes, if you aren't wrong, then you have no way to demonstrate that you can learn what you said or did was wrong, correct the record, and grow from it. If you don't trip and fall, you can't demonstrate that you have the wherewithal to get back up and get going. And so God actually wants us to stumble and fall so we can demonstrate the resolve to improve, to prove that we are trustworthy, that we're reliable, that we can grow from our mistakes. And if we don't have that opportunity, he has no way to evaluate us. He has no way to determine whether or not he can empower us and allow us off of this planet to go explore the universe with him. He has no justification for making us eternal in his presence, because we could make a mistake and then wallow in it and make it worse. And God can't have that happen in forevermore. So this idea of sin as you make a mistake in your life, that's completely of no interest to him. He wants you to have individual foibles so that you can learn from them and grow as a result of them. And it's the rebellion against him. It's misleading people about him religiously that he is concerned about. And that's exactly what's happening here. So Paul is promoting what God hates. And so there is no resolution for promoting religion. It's over. But so he's completely wrong when he talks about sins of us. So that he might possibly gouge or tear out. So here in the first run-on sentence, in the first book of the Christian New Testament, we have the entire purpose of the Christian New Testament. And what is it? It's to tear us away from the Torah. It's to condemn the Torah and to create a religion that is divorced of the Torah, but that still uses the Torah as its proof text. Without the Torah, there's no proof text for Christianity. But the religion itself, in its first run-on sentence, now wants to gouge or tear away from the past inflexible, unrelenting circumstances of the old system. The old system, in Paul's view, is the Torah.
And there was no rabbi to step up and say you're wrong to him.
Well, no, that's a real problem. There was no rabbi that said you're wrong. First of all, the Torah is quite flexible. We have enormous wiggle room in what we can do with our lives. God is not a teacher of black and white. He wants us to think. If you become dogmatic, then you're missing the entire point. Torah is not a series of laws. There's not a law in it. The Torah is teaching and guidance, instructions and directions. And as such, it opens up our possibilities so that we can learn and grow, as opposed to confining us. So it's not something that confines us. It's something that liberates us based upon what we learn and discover in its guidance. So God also says that for example, in Hosea, he is very clear. He says that you are destroyed because of your ignorance. And he says that because you have forgotten my Torah, I'm going to forget your children. So if you want to be torn away from the Torah, then you are out of God's minds and thoughts. And if you're outside of God's minds and thoughts, you have a 0% chance of impressing him that you deserve to spend eternity with him. So there is nothing that you could write that would be further from the truth than that the purpose is that our sins are somehow resolved by tearing us away from God's old system. Because God doesn't have an old system. He has a system. The system is in the Torah. The Torah presents the terms and conditions of the covenant and the benefits of the covenant. It presents the 7 steps that you walk to receive the benefits that are prescribed in the covenant. And that's through the Moed Mikre. He has a son, he has a Messiah, he has a chosen one. It happens to be Dod. And he has a timeline, and he has an entire plan, and it's all laid out from beginning to end. And you start in the garden, you return to the garden. It's a very comprehensive, beautifully told story that everything fits together, that results in the emancipation, the enrichment, the empowerment, the enablement of those who capitalize on Yahweh's instructions. You want to be torn away from that, then you will either 2 things will happen. Either you will die and your soul will be exterminated, or if you promote this lie, like Paul's doing here, you create this lie, you promote this lie, then your soul spends an eternity in Sheol because of the consequence of misleading people regarding God. So this statement here, let's call it the 17th mistake. This one is catastrophic. Paul is condemning that which he calls old, unrelenting. It's his view of that became what's now known as the Old Testament. It's why you'll never hear me use it unless I'm going to refute that terminology. There is no such thing as an Old Testament. God has testimony. That testimony is presented in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. It does not include the New Testament. God is not changing his plan. If he changed his plan, then his old plan was not reliable. If his old plan is not reliable, his change is not reliable. I mean, think it through, folks. If God's old plan is unflexible, unrelenting, keeps you chained to your sin, then there is a 0% chance that this man, as irrational as he was, as many fallacies as he commits, has come up with a new plan from the same God that is capable of being reliable, that can be believed through faith, when he says that the old plan that is filled with prophecy, proving its credibility, fails. It's the dumbest idea ever. And that's Paul's principal ploy, is that God couldn't save anyone with his Torah. So he tapped me as the spokesman for the world, such that I would contradict everything he said and come up with a new plan that was achievable through faith. And that if you believe my new plan, that I will save you from God's failed plan by way of the God who appointed me.
Billions of people believe that crap.
It really is no more complicated than that. That's the dunderheadedness of Christianity. The primary proposition is impossible. The God who authored the Torah and said it was eternal and it is the means to liberate us, emancipate us, to enrich us, to empower us, to make us immortal, could not have inspired a man to contradict all of that, to nullify all of that, and then come up with a new plan that is completely contrary to the old plan, that simply is to be believed and to have that new plan be credible. Impossible. Now, if you want to believe it, that's up to you. I don't really care. If you want to destroy your soul, that's on you. But it's rationally impossible. Which had been in place. Well, what had been in place? Paul's talking about Paul's not creating his God, his Iesou Christou, out of thin air. He is projecting him on what was said of Dowd. So he is now saying that the basis of my Iesou Christou was a horrible, terrible plan. That's the one that had been put in place. And I'm using it, by the way, to justify everything I claim about Iesou Christou, even if I have to misquote it and misappropriate it and twist it so the meaning is exactly the opposite. But nonetheless, don't look behind the curtain. Let me pull the levers. But the system that had been in place that he refers to is the Torah. And he's saying the Torah, that the whole purpose, Iesou Christou, his imaginary God-man, was to pluck and tear us away from the Torah. Now, if you believe that, you're a Christian. If you believe that, you're an idiot, but you're a Christian. Good luck with that. Faith in that which is untrue is worthless. You can have total and complete faith in that which is obviously untrue, and you are completely screwed. Blued and tattooed. But you can tattoo a cross on your upper arm and feel all good about it. Which had been in place, which is now, he's now going to define the Torah. Paul's word for defining the Torah is poneros. Have you heard of an English word that's based on poneros?
Oh, yeah.
What's it called?
Pornography.
Pornography. And his first on sentence, Paul called the Torah pornographic, trash, disadvantageous. Pornography. And that's the religion of 2.5 billion people today. Most popular religion ever created was created by the man who began in his first run-on sentence by calling the Torah pornography, and saying that his entire mission, in sync with the God and the imaginary Iesou Christou, was to tear you away from the Torah pornography, which he now says is in opposition to the desire and will of the God and the Father of us. How can the Torah be in opposition to the God who inspired the Torah, who gave us the Torah. Do you think that there is any realm? I mean, go off there. My younger son, when he didn't like what was happening around him, he retreated to Planelia. Planelia was his own private planet. He had the most beautiful girlfriend on Planelia. He was king of Planelia, and Planelia, he made the rules. But even on Planelia, it ain't possible that the God who inspired the Torah could tell you that his desire was to have his Torah, the centerpiece of his communication to humankind, be labeled as pornography, so that this man, making all manner of rational fallacies, could claim that his goal was to tear you away from it. That's the first sentence in the religion of Christianity. If you are a Christian and now are aware of this, you are either a complete ignoramus, incapable of rational thought, and so wrapped up in your faith that you just can't admit it, or you're now running for the door and saying, how do I get out of here? And is there truth? Yeah, there is truth. His name is Yahowah. He authored the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. I have compiled 25,000 pages of translations and commentary on them, having invested 100,000 hours, offering it all to you free in the 35 books of the Yada Yahowah series, where you can come to know the truth. It's all free at yadayah.com. You want the answer, go there. You want to be lied to, wallow in your New Testament. But now you know the truth. And what I have just shared with you, there isn't an answer. There isn't a scholar. There isn't a rebuttal. There isn't an AI. There is no answer for anything I have just shared with you. So, probably a good place for us to conclude this show. We'll pick it up from there and our next show, because it actually goes downhill from this. It gets worse. And then it gets worse. And then he piles lies on top of lies. After a while, he has made a sandcastle of lies. And that's your religion if you're a Christian.
Well, their response is always the same. I have to go ask my pastor. Good luck with that.
I can tell you that when I was just a couple of years into this, Yahowah met me one day. It was a Towrah in 2001. I didn't know him. He obviously knew me. He knew me really well, really well. And he asked me to begin by excoriating Islam. And, I said, okay, I don't know who this is really. And I see by the time I got those words out of my mouth, it says, oh, come on, idiot. You know who this is. Who else is going to be talking to you like this? This is what I want you to do. And he I said, okay, let's say I buy into the story that you're God. Then can I negotiate? Because last time I checked, no one has ever survived what you're asking me to do, which is to expose and condemn Muhammad and Allah and the Quran. Well, I mean, let's just pretend now that you are who you say you are. Can I negotiate? Because, well, it seems like a death sentence. Now, I'm not so sure that sounds like a lot of fun. I said, sure. What do you want, kid? I laid out 3 things. These are the 3 things I want. He said, okay, that sounds fine with me. Reach into your pocket. They did. There was the answer to the 3 things I wanted. I said, okay, so now you got my attention. I guess we're going to begin. I guess I'm going to find out. And here we are. 10,000 death threats later, 35 books, 100,000 hours, thousands, tens of thousands of hours of radio and now of vlogs. And here we are, telling you the story of God, revealing his message as completely and as accurately as has ever been presented before. And I can tell you that 2 years into that, I had learned enough that one of my closest friends at the time, and I was one of his closest friends, was Dr. Jerry Falwell. the reverend who had been on the cover multiple times of Time magazine. He was the head of the moral majority. He was the first televangelist. Remarkable man, actually a very lovable, likable man in person, a great conversationalist, exceedingly kind to people in his inner circle. And we spent a lot of time together. I mean, thousands and thousands of hours together. And very early on, and it was before Yahowah had called me to ask me to do this, that I built my relationship with him. And as I was getting to know Yahowah, and I had already abandoned Christianity by that time, it became obvious that everything in Christianity was a lie. And so I asked for a meeting with Jerry Falwell, the pastor's pastor, if you will. And I said, I want you to bring, please, the head of the Hebrew division of your, he owned Liberty University. So bring your top Hebrew scholar. I want you to bring your top theologians. I've got a whole series of things I want to go through, and I want them to be able to challenge what I have to say. And I went through all the reasons that Christianity was false, that I'd already deduced, and that's not even a fraction of 1% of what I know now. At the end of all that, not a single time did any one of the Hebrew scholars challenge anything I said. And Jerry just looked at me, put his hand on the top of my hand, and he said, everything you've said is true. But if I were to say those things, the people that sit in the pews of my church and make donations wouldn't come. All of the envelopes that arrive daily here supporting my university wouldn't arrive. And if you say those things, they're going to label you a kook. So you want to go ask your pastor. Don't be surprised if he tells you the truth. They know it's a lie. Thank you for listening.